and the facts behind those events and policies that are shaping our world for today and for tomorrow. Join us weekly on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. following Amy Goodman's Democracy Now! Program. And of course, our program is live, so you can call in and join our discussion. We really hope that you will. Our number here again is 716-878-5104. That's 716-878-5104. We're also here in studio with Norm McCarter, who's an in-studio audience of one. Welcome, Norm.
Thank you, Mr. Hare, and good morning, sir.
All right, and he kept the snow from showing up, today, so we had a good drive to work. We thank you so much.
Yeah, we did. Absolutely good.
And we're also here with Willie H., who does the live streaming of the program. Welcome, Willie.
Welcome, everybody, to Living for the People with L. Nathan Hare. Make sure you call in 716-878-5104.
We started a discussion on Monday, and we got so deep into the weeds on one part of it, I didn't really get a chance to explore the rest of this subject with us. But I want to try to cover a couple of things. One of the things I want to try to cover is that, and guys, we've talked about this many times. Your view of something, your position, your opinion about something is based on your point of view.
Right, that's correct.
Your point of view is not just, I'm a Methodist, or I'm a Ukrainian, or I'm a this kind of ist or that kind of ist. Your perspective is also where you sit physically in relation to what it is that you are drawing an opinion about. So if I'm living in Buffalo, New York, and you're telling me about something that happened in Palestine, I have a different textured feel about that than if I lived in Jordan and you talk to me about something that was happening in Palestine. I'm pretty sure the people who live in Jordan, sitting where they are, their tactile, tangible, position or feeling about what it is that involves Palestine is different than my feel of it sitting in Buffalo, New York.
Right.
And, I met like 3 Palestinians in the last, 12 years. The Jordanians live with millions of Palestinians all the time, right?
Right.
Their view of it is necessarily going to be different.
Right.
So what I'm trying to help us to understand is that we have to struggle to provide ourselves with a broad enough points of view that it gives us a balanced perspective.
Right.
That you are basing your views as much as possible on what are concrete facts. Now, some things are not facts, right? I mean, some things you can't know. There's a lot of nuances about, this idea of Palestine being the homeland of Israel. I'm pretty sure Hittites and Edomites and Jebusites and every kind of ite, that lived in that Palestinian corridor, they probably feel like that's their homeland.
Mm-hmm.
They felt like they were there before there was any place called Israel. They was there when the Israelis showed up, and they were there when the Israelis left. They've been there the whole time. How does that become Israel's homeland? How does it stop being their homeland? But that's their point of view. Native Americans who wound up migrating into some parts of the Grand Canyon, they began to believe on a deity that they called Masa'u. Well, I guess if you live in this canyon and you say something out loud and it bounces off the walls for 16 times, it may give you the impression that there's more players out here than just me and my brothers and sisters. There's somebody else out here as well. Your perspective is different because you live in a different place. You are in a different position in relation to what's going on. So I'm saying this to us because we really have to be responsible in how we let our mouths say things that we claim that our brains are thinking. You have to feed your brain with facts before your brain can think. Otherwise, you're just being driven by emotion. And we can't allow ourselves to be driven by emotion. Too much is at stake, right?
Yeah.
So we talked about, this situation with Israel and Hamas. And we tried to put this in the context of the relationship between Israel and the Palestinians. So what does that do? Norm, you spoke about this a couple of weeks ago. First thing you need to understand about that is the word Palestinian and the word Hamas are two different words describing two different sets of people.
Yes, sir.
Now, all of the people who are Hamas are Palestinians,
Right.
but not all of the people who are Palestinians are Hamas.
And
Right.
that's the problem right there, because when a lot of media share news, they make Hamas and Palestinians synonymous, meaning it's one the same thing, and it's not.
And I want to show you how that error in thinking turns into real policy that does real harm
Right.
to real human beings.
Right.
If you think that the word Palestinian and the word Hamas are the same thing, when Israel says, terrible thing done on October 7th, which was horrific,
Right.
right? 1,200 people were killed.
Right.
Everybody involved in it, everybody who sanctioned it, everybody who was a co-signer of it, they need to be found. They need to be put in jail,
Right.
or whatever the rules are, the
Right.
laws are that govern that kind of behavior.
Absolutely.
That needs to happen to those people.
Right.
Absolutely. But the 18 to 20 million Palestinians that have been killed since October 7th, most of them, I would say all but maybe 4 of them, had anything to do with the attack on Israel.
Right.
They were just buying prescription drugs, at their drugstores, and
Right.
food in their supermarkets,
Right.
and cleaning people's homes and making brick, and laying pipes and, growing wine and dates and
Right.
the stuff that citizens do in their own homeland.
Right. Mr. Hare, you had said it before. You had gave us an example of, let's take the Indians. Let's say Indians had a group, some Indians, maybe a couple of hundred, and they warring against now Americans, people who stole their land, that they thought stole their land, and they got a group and they killed, let's say a couple thousand Americans. Now, the Americans wants to go against the Hamas, but they're calling Hamas Indians, and they're attacking all the Indians.
Right.
That's what's actually
Right.
happening.
And it licenses you. If you say that all Palestinians are Hamas,
Right.
and Hamas is all Palestinians,
Right.
then it licenses you to attack all Palestinians and say that they're all responsible for the assault on October 7th against Israel that was carried out by Hamas.
Right.
It allows you to be able to just attack all Palestinians,
Right.
Yeah.
which is what Israel has been doing.
Well, the way I see it, Mr. Hare, it's like it's a giant smoke screen, and it's put up there because, I guess just like the USA, when we took the Indians' land, that's what the Israelis are trying to do with the Palestinians. They are basically utilizing the fact that Hamas, which we know is an organization, but they're linked in and all together.
They're an organization like the PLO,
Palestine
and,
Liberation. Yeah,
right.
But my point is, the Israelis just want that land.
Period.
And they're wiping out
Period. Right.
Palestinians.
And any
systematic.
justification they can use to take more and more. See, the words that get used tell you about where people are coming from. All of the Palestinians who react to their lands being taken away, their rights being taken away, their inability to operate as citizens in any country, all of those Palestinians are referred to as terrorists.
Yeah.
They're horrible people. But right now, as we speak, over the course of the past 7 days, Israelites have, well, I shouldn't say Israelites, Zionists, very militant, Israelites have just rolled into Palestinian lands in the Gaza Strip and just driven people out of their houses at gunpoint, right? They've killed people who who refused to move, taken people's homes, rebuilt the homes, to reflect these Jewish people's preferences, and they call the Jewish people who invade these people. I mean, we're not talking about a couple hundred. I mean, 10 or 15 people. We're talking about hundreds of Palestinian homes have been attacked this month by the Israelis, by some Israelis, and their homes were taken from them. They were driven off their land, or killed. And those people who did this are referred to in the news media as settlers. It creates a different spirit of understanding when somebody's referred to as a settler as opposed to somebody being referred to as a terrorist.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure that the people that rolled in from Israel wearing the badge of Zionism, saying this is our holy land, who bombed people's houses, shot people out of their houses, ran people out of their homes, left them with nothing, and took their homes and now occupy their homes. I'm pretty sure that if that had happened to anybody in the United States, we would think that the people who did that were terrorists. We wouldn't think that they were settlers, right?
Right.
But that's what's going on here. So let me just kind of speak to this context. When I went to this article that I talked to you about, written by Joshua Stanton and Olivia Brodsky, and the article was titled, "Why the Israeli-Hamas War is So Hard to Talk About, Identical Narratives but Different Facts," which is the point that I'm trying to make. I want us to get ourselves to think outside of the emotion. Use some tests. So, for example, listen to how people talk about this incident, this situation with the Israeli-Hamas war.
Right.
They say things like, "Well, it's complicated." Okay, it's complicated. That means we're not required to think it through because it's complicated, right? They say, "Well, it's not my place to say something. I'm not a Palestinian. I'm not an Israeli. It's not my place to say anything." Well, they've taken, literally $10 or plus billion of your money every year since 1948 to help build and stabilize Israel as a country. A country that has fewer than 8 million people in it. They're getting $10 plus billion of your money every year for 75 years in a row. And you're telling me that it's not your place to have something to say? So then they say, well, people are scared to speak and they're punished for speaking. Who's scared to speak? And what punishment what are you worried about? But there's an answer to that question. Ask those presidents of MIT, of Harvard, and Princeton who got called before the Congress. I'm not even sure Congress has the authority to do this. They were called before Congress to testify why they allowed students to call for the genocide of Israelites. That's what they said. This is what I mean about, you really have to look at facts, because the assertion that I think it was the Princeton president McGill, I believe she lost her job over this. She was forced to resign. Dr. Gay kept her job, and I think the president of MIT is keeping his job, or her job. But the point is that they were being attacked because they claim that, and I just want to look this up on, here we go. Here's the actual incident. This is an AP report. The title of the report is "A Chant Used at Anti-Israel Protests on 2 College Campuses Does Not Call for Jewish Genocide." Now, have you seen a single report, as you've listened about this thing over the course of the past, however long it's been going on, a week and a half? Have you heard a single report that said that the students did not call for Israeli genocide, that never occurred? Have you heard that in any report?
No.
You got people being driven out of their jobs. Some rich Jewish, financier said he's withdrawing $100 million of funding that he was giving to.
Okay. All right, money talks. All right, that's what happened.
And stuff walks, right?
Right.
And the stuff that's walking is, well, you call for the genocide, or you let these students call for the genocide of Israel. A, That never occurred. That's
That
not
never
what the
occurred.
student said.
Right.
B, what would you do if the student said something that you liked, but some other people didn't like? What if the student said, well, those Palestinians, they shouldn't be living in the promised land anyway. All of them should be driven out. What if a student said that? Would you say that student who ran his mouth like that should be kicked off the campus? Are you going to take away that student's right to free speech? Let me just read to you what was actually said.
Yeah.
The chant uttered, this is in an article written by Philip Marcello, writing for the Associated Press. This was, the article was written, I believe, on October 31st. He says, the chant uttered during recent demonstrations is being misrepresented. Protesters are not saying we want Jewish genocide, but Israel, we charge you with genocide. That's a different statement. The protesters were not asking for people to commit genocide against the Israelis.
Right.
The protesters were saying that we are charging you Israelis with committing genocide against these Palestinian people.
And some innocent Palestinian people. That's correct.
And again, facts got to matter. You can't just make up facts and then make policy based on your made up facts. If you do that, then we have to start putting Donald Trump signs on your face and on your body, because that's what Donald Trump and his ilk of people do. That's what Michael Johnson, the Speaker of the House, does. That's what these people do all the time. They invent something and then get everybody to get amped up about what you invent.
Right.
That has to end. They talk about there's two sides of an issue. Of course there's two sides of an issue. But are we being driven by both sides? By how we look at it from both sides? Or are we being driven by just one side? Another part of the article talks about there is a relentless propaganda campaign that affords nuance, humanization, and empathy to only one side. Again, when you hear about 18,000 to 20,000 Palestinians dead, that's all you hear. When you hear about the 1,200 people in Israel who were killed on October 7th, 65 days ago, you hear about women, children, citizens, people who are not perpetrators, at all, just entirely victimized. You hear that perspective. The Palestinians, if you hear anything about them at all, and there's maybe 18 or so thousand Palestinians that are dead, they don't tell you that 60 to 70% of the Palestinian dead are women and children. Over 5,000 of those people that are dead are children, people under the age of 16.
Wow, innocent people.
Right. So you can't be Hamas at 8 years old, right? I mean, you can't be a soldier, at 10 years old. At least we don't think that that's the case. So the point I'm making is the way we talk about things reveals what our actual feelings are about what's going on. We actually are communicating our opinion with the way that we talk about stuff. Go ahead, Nora.
As far as the way that I look at it and the way that I'm seeing things is, it's not just the way that we talk about things, Mr. Hare, but it seems to me that it's the way that we're getting the information, and the way that we receive this information, through the media. The media seems to always alter or change the reporting style, the way that they do it, and frame it towards money.
And that's the issue, because the media is just a name of a function that exists in our society. The media. Somebody owns the media.
Right.
Somebody tells the people who own the media what they want to be said and how they want it to be said.
Right. Exactly how they want it reported.
Right.
Yeah.
It has to be approved.
So, they talk about, the Palestinians have this trauma about their land being continually colonized by various empires. The Persians, the Assyrians, the Greeks, the Romans, the Turks, and so on, over periods of 2,000 years, have colonized Palestine. When World War II happened and the Germans were trying to conquer, the first time they tried to conquer Germany, they also wanted to conquer the Palestinian corridor.
Right.
They wanted the Palestinian corridor because Jerusalem is in the Palestinian corridor, and they wanted Jerusalem to be under the control of whatever Frederick Wilhelm and these Prussians, whatever they wanted to be done with the relationship with Jerusalem, because they considered themselves to be the custodians of the Holy Roman See, the seat of power in Rome. But if you're a Palestinian, you have real substantive reasons to be concerned that people will come and take away your land, take away your citizenship, take you away,
right,
and put you in other places and so on, and replace you in your own land. They've experienced that.
Yeah.
Well, I need for us to understand that this is what Jewish people have experienced. Jewish people got kicked out in 721 BC by the Assyrians. When they came back, they never were able to recreate the nation of Israel, but Judea still existed, or Judah still existed. They got kicked out in 585 BC. They came back about 75 years later. They became a province of Greece, and then eventually became a province of Rome, but they never had been able to recreate Israel again until 1948.
Just a quick question, Mr. Can you tell me why the PLO was formed? How come it was formed?
The Palestine Liberation Organization was formed in reaction to the Zionist Jewish people's success in getting control of parts of Palestine, right?
Yeah.
So half of Palestine, a little bit more than half of Palestine, was given to by the United Nations, was given to the people who considered themselves to be Jewish. It was just given to them whole cloth.
What was this, around 47 or during that time
That was the
period?
Balfour Resolution
During that
in
time period.
1947.
Yeah.
Then the Israelis will tell you that they fought a war of independence in 1948. It's odd because who were they fighting the war of independence against? There was no Israel prior to 1948.
Right.
There was no Israel. So if there was no Israel until 1948,
Who were you
being
independent
getting independence from?
Yeah.
So what they do is, they just change the words. The word actually is they were fighting a war to annex, or to acquire Palestine and give Palestine to a new Jewish state to be supported by Jewish people around the world. That was what they really was really occurring, not an independence movement against the Carthaginians or against the Christians or against the Buddhists. There's no war like that. But the way you use words can shape how people think about what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So, but Jews have a right to fear the possibility of being expelled from their homes, because that's happened to them in their past. Mm-hmm. But it's happened to the Palestinians much more frequently than it's happened to the Jewish people, and it happened much more thoroughly than it happened to the Jewish people, and it continues to happen at this very moment. When the Jewish state was established in 1948, they kicked almost 1 million Palestinians physically out of the portion of Palestine that became Israel. They kicked 750,000 to 1 million Palestinians out. They told them, get out. You have, I don't know how many days they gave them, maybe 4 hours or something. You get out. They couldn't take their land. They couldn't take their homes, couldn't take much of their belongings, their vineyards, their stores, their businesses, their cemeteries, all that stuff they had to leave behind, because the Zionists control over this new state of Israel said, this is for us and us only, not for you. Even though prior to the establishment of the state of Israel, Jewish people had lived in Palestine all this time. They were never the majority population or even a significant population. They were, maybe 20, 30, 40,000 people in 1900. So they were not a big population of people in Palestine, but they had lived in Palestine for all the years since the term Israel was given to these people by the one God. When the one God renamed Jacob Israel, from that time forward, people who consider themselves to be Jewish have lived in the Palestinian corridor. And although there's been little spats between people, they're no different than the spats that go on between Methodists and Baptists and Calvinists and Pentecostals. They all got spats that go on between them too.
Absolutely.
They were those kind of spats.
Yeah.
But they were not like wars going on, over territory, over your right to exist. So this assertion that the Palestinians are somehow accountable for the expulsion of Jewish people from the Palestinian corridor is specious. That just did not occur. So it seems useful to examine these assertions by Israel and by the Palestinians in this way. It cannot be questioned that both groups suffered the trauma of mass expulsions from Middle Eastern and North African countries in 1948. That happened to both populations.
Yeah.
And that the Jewish population specifically suffered what they refer to as the German pogroms. And pogroms are these campaigns that were waged against Jewish people simply for being Jewish people or any other particular people, a campaign to strip these people of their citizenship, of their rights, of their sometimes even their lives, and so on.
Right.
That's what these German pogroms were about. And, of course, the Holocaust, which if you don't understand that the Holocaust existed and what it would mean if you're talking about 6 million people being killed, there were probably more people killed in the Holocaust, Jewish people killed, than there were Jewish people who lived combined any place else in the world outside of Germany. I mean, just think about that for a second. They killed 6 million, primarily German and to some extent Polish, and other Slavic state Jews, but mostly German Jews. They killed these people, 6 million people,
just
right?
Because of who they were,
right?
Nothing to do with if they were bad.
And there couldn't have been more than 12 million Jewish people in the world at that time, right? So that's like half the population. The point I'm trying to make is that's like half of your population. So think about there's 50 million African people that live in the United States. Think about it if a week from now you found out that they had killed 25 million African people, half the entire population. What would be going on inside your chest right now? See, everything that I had ever been about would be set aside. Only revenge.
Right.
Only vengeance would be in my heart.
Right.
Okay. So, I mean, I say this, but not that I want to co-sign vengeance. I say this to help us to understand the perspective of the Jewish people.
Right.
You just can't underestimate how that's a scar that never heals.
Right. Let me add to this, Mr. Hare, and this is just a perspective that is kind of coming up because as we go through history, and you sit and you see, it's just like every strong nation or wherever you come from are taking over weaker nations, and I mean it goes back to us conquering the Indians. It goes the Germans and what they did to the Jews.
See, I got to stop you there for a second, Norm. We have to amend our words. When you use the term of who conquered the Indians and you use the word us, and it's coming out of your mouth, it sounds like you're including you.
I don't mean it that way.
Yeah,
Mr.
but I want us to stop saying after the fact, I didn't mean it that way.
Yeah.
I want us to stop saying it that way in the first place. Yeah. Say that the European descended Americans conquered these Indians, or these people that they called it, because they weren't Indians, but the people they called Indians, these European descended Americans, did that to the indigenous population of North America, and other people did it to South America.
Let me add this though too. But I just found out too. Even though they did that, they also used black cowboys to exterminate too. So
No question. No question.
we have a little part.
Black cowboys said, well, if I kill me a couple of Indians, I can eat. Right. I mean, let's be honest about it. You run around there calling yourself the Buffalo Soldiers. People talking about you because buffaloes have curly hair. So they said you were a Buffalo Soldier because you got curly hair. I mean, they're actually dissing you with the name that they give you, and they got you celebrating them dissing you. Right. Wow. I mean that's how insane this is. But it's because the words that people are using in whatever mediums we're learning from, those words trap us into thinking in ways that are actually counter to our own self-interest.
Right.
So we have to be careful about that. So I said the Palestinian people did not expel the Jewish population from Palestine. So I agree that Jewish people were deported from the Palestinian corridor at different times in history. We talked about that. But that does not mean that the Palestinians are in the same situation that they're the perpetrators. The Palestinians were expelled from their homes and their lands in the Palestinian corridor as well. And so it's important that we understand that. The Palestinians never waged any pogroms against Jewish people and were not responsible for any of the Holocaust inflicted on the Jewish people. Yet the Palestinians are being forced to pay the blood price for the sins of other people. There's another point. Jews may in truth fear the rise of anti-Semitism. In truth, the October 7th Hamas attack on Israel provoked a rise in anti-Islamist prejudice and bias in the world. If you all recall, if you just allow yourself to remember, October 7th isn't that long ago. When that occurred, it didn't turn into anti-Semitism when 1,200 Jewish people were killed by this Hamas assault on Israel. That's not what occurred. What occurred was people around the world said, I told you those Muslims, they're all terrorists, they're horrible people, and it inflamed the anti-Islam feeling, phobia, what they call it, Islamophobia, that's the word I'm looking for. It inflamed Islamophobia.
People that always suspect that was uncomfortable with Muslims.
They didn't like Muslims anyway, and so this gave them, now a license to feel what they already had been feeling.
Gotcha.
Right?
Gotcha.
And so it's important to understand, again, the context. Right. Hamas is a body of people who are probably all Palestinians, but they only represent, 20 to 30,000 total Palestinians. There are 2.4 million Palestinians who live in the Gaza Strip alone.
Right.
You can't punish the 2.4 million Palestinians who live in the Gaza Strip for something that was being done by Hamas, which represents less than 0.1% of the population of Palestinian people.
Right. Yep.
It has been continuing Israeli counterattacks that have killed nearly 20,000 Palestinians, most of whom have been civilians who had nothing to do with the attack. That has provoked the rise of that has provoked the rise of anti-Semitism in many quarters of the world. The reason why you see this anti-Semitism rise, initially it was Islamophobia, but when it went from 1,200 Israelites being killed to 3 days later, a couple hundred Palestinians. 4 days later, 1,000 Palestinians. A week later, 2,000 Palestinians. A month later, 7,000 Palestinians. 2 months later, almost 20,000 Palestinian people dead.
Right.
25% and more of all of the buildings in the entire Gaza Strip have been impacted by bombs, either bombed directly or shrapnel from bombs that have blown out walls and windows and so on.
Wow.
In these buildings. That's a quarter of the population of Palestine, the building infrastructure of Palestine that has been either demolished or severely compromised by the Israeli bombing. That can't be a campaign to root out Hamas. That's a campaign to root out Palestinians.
Yeah.
And that's that sign. See, finally we got our live streaming director to give us the sign that we've gone too far over. We need to talk to our sponsors. So let's take a quick break. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. Please don't go away. We will see you on the other side of the break here at Living for the People at 91.3 FM WBNY.
Now this one is brutal and wild.
You don't know, so stepping out sound a champion sound easy universal. Oh, you miss.
Music for yours and mine. Stepping out, giving rubber down all time, yeah.
Yes, Buffalo, once again, you are in tune with the Stepping Out Sound Session. Your host, Universal, here every Sunday night, 5 to 9 p.m., 91.3 WBNY Buffalo.
DJ Universal in the place.
Stepping Out Sound Session, Reggae Radio, every Sunday night, 5 to 9 p.m., 91.3 WBNY Buffalo.
Ready for radio that's challenging, innovative, and encouraging? Tune in, Living for the People.
This is L. Nathan Hare. Join me right here, 91.3 FM WBNY. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 9 a.m. after Amy Goodman's Democracy Now! We'll provide objective analysis regarding current issues. Call 878-5104. It's Living for the People on 91.3 FM WBNY. All right, welcome back to Living for the People. This is L. Nathan here, your host. We're here with Norm McCarter, who's an in-studio audience of one. Welcome back, Norm.
Thank you, Mr. Air.
And we're also here with Willie H., who does the live streaming of the program. Welcome, Willie.
Welcome, everybody, to Living for the People with L. Nathan here, calling live 716-878-5104.
So I know it takes a little while for me to get to because I talk so much, but I think we pretty much helped us to understand that as we look at this Hamas-Israel war that they keep calling a war, it's hard to understand this even as a war because a war suggests that there's like front lines and back lines and that people are firing at each other, in some kind of combat. That's not really what's been going on.
No.
It's been Israel dropping bombs from miles away and flattening places.
Kind of a revolution of their own, right?
Right.
Mr. Hare, what it seemed to me like Israel is just on a promotion to eradicate Palestinians altogether.
Right. But what I was thinking about it, when you talk about it like it's a war, it gives you the impression, like what you see in Ukraine. You see the Russians, they've taken territory. The Ukrainians are resisting the Russians taking territory. They're rumbling over blocks and houses and, rumbling like that. That's the war that you see. You don't see that kind of war going on in the Gaza Strip. What you see are the Israelis just dropping thousands and thousands of bombs all over Palestine, crumbling buildings and so on. And once they have everything pummeled, then they come in with their tanks and then they shoot everything that looks like it can move. They shoot everything and they call it all Hamas. And then their soldiers get out of the tanks and come in and try to actually, get into the tunnels and whatever other infrastructure they claim belongs to Hamas. That's a different campaign. Now, in truth, it's not that no Israelis are exposing themselves to the possibility of being killed or injured. There are, if I'm not mistaken, the last report I read, about 700 Israeli soldiers have been killed in the conflict. But it's just the way the conflict is presented. It's presented as if there was like combat, street to street going on in Israel, in Gaza, and that's not the case at all. What you really have is Gaza being bombed over and over and over again, all over Gaza, just being bombed to smithereens. And then when it's completely, disassembled, then the tanks come in, and then the troops come in behind the tanks. so that it really minimizes the possibility of any casualties on the Israeli side. So I just say that just for perspective, just for us to understand what's going on. But I want to talk a little bit before we get done with today's program. Here's a quick case study on how the media slants the news in a way that reflects the bias of the media,
Right.
but it doesn't seem to you like that's what they're doing. This was an article written by Cami Mondo. It was entitled, "Biden Losing Support with Key Voters Following Failed Attempts to Thwart the Supreme Court." And it sounds like Biden has been trying to do something and failing to do it. And this is a report talking about Biden's failure. Does that what that report sounds like to you?
Sounds that way, Mr.
So here's how it goes. When he ran for president in 2020, I'm quoting the article, Biden vowed to make student debt cancellation a top priority of his administration. However, Biden has since hit several roadblocks impeding progress on that front, frustrating several young voters whose support would be crucial to the president's election next year. For young voters between the ages of 18 and 29, their disappointment over Biden's failure to cancel student loan debt has further ignited the overall negative sentiment toward the economy at large, which has become a top election issue heading into the 2024 cycle. Let's think about that for a second. Young voters, we're talking about several dozen young voters they talked to, that turned into young voters in total, 18 to 29, disappointed with Biden for his failure to cancel student loan debt, and that this ignites this negative sentiment about the economy. Now, you could have a robust economy and still have people saying that students should pay their loan debts. They shouldn't be coming to the federal government and asking the federal government to pay off their loans. Mm-hmm. They should pay. They took out the loans. They got the education. They walked away with the degrees. They should pay for it, right? Independent of whether or not the economy is good or bad,
right.
You would still say that if you borrow money, you owe the money that you borrowed.
Right.
How do these things connect? Because the way the new media is writing the story, it doesn't connect those things that ought to be connected, so that people get the wrong or they get a slanted perspective. The crucial voting block of these 18 to 29 voters, crucial now. You don't know that these people are crucial or not, because you don't know what percentage of these 18 to 29-year-old people actually show up to vote in the first place.
Right.
If only 25% of them show up to vote in the first place, they're not the crucial block. If it's 65 and older voters, and 80% of the 65 and older voters show up to vote in every election, they're the crucial vote. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. This crucial block of this 18 to 29-year-olds, the article says that they trust Republicans. This is the article quoting now. They trust Republicans to handle the economy over Democrats, according to a recent survey by ABC News. Another poll from the Institute of Politics at Harvard Kennedy School earlier this year found that 70% of voters between the ages of 18 and 29 rate the current state of the economy either very bad or fairly bad. So without going through the rest of the article, I just think that it's important for us to test facts.
Yeah.
When people say, and I'm not saying that this is not occurring, lots of people are mouthing, yeah, the economy's bad, things aren't going to go. Where are you getting that from? Why are you saying that? What are you looking at that's bad?
Right.
Well, I was just listening to, Stormfront News. I was listening to Breitbart.
Right.
I was listening to Fox News.
Right.
And they said the economy's bad.
Right.
What are you saying, that they're lying? Yes, that's what I'm saying to you. I'm saying that they're lying to you.
Right.
Okay? So let me just work with you on this. I went through an economics report. Economics is part of my study, stream.
Yes, sir.
And I went through what are the indicators of a good economy.
All right.
They gave 6. One was employment, one was consumer spending, the third one was consumer sentiment, the fourth was business indicators, the fifth was bank lending, and the sixth was shipping levels. Shipping meaning that if you have a lot of trucks leaving warehouses and going to retail spots
Right.
to distribute the goods all over the country, that means that there's a expanding consumer economy. That's a good indicator that the economy is moving, right?
Yeah.
So this is how indicators work. Employment. We are, and Norm, you and I were talking about this a little while ago.
Yes, sir.
We have a 3.9% unemployment rate.
Strong.
We have been under the 4% mark for unemployment since the first day of, not the first day, but it's first month or two of the Biden administration.
Right.
We have been under 4% over the course of that entire time.
Right.
That means that whether you say it was Biden's initiative or whether it was other people who were part of the team, it was their initiative, whether it was just the direction the country was going in already. The reality is unemployment is really low compared to where it has been over the course of many years in the past. It's been very low, and it's stayed low over the course of this time period. People are getting jobs. If you want a job, you can get a job in America today.
Yeah.
And you might not get the job you want,
Right.
but you know,
can get
if
a
you
job.
owe $400 a week, you know, in gas and lights and mortgage and rent, you know, and so on, you better have a job that pays you $500 a week so you can make ends meet, right, and still have something at the end of the day.
Right.
Consumer spending. For better or for worse, the U.S. economy is driven by consumer spending. Consumer spending in the United States increased to $15.47 trillion dollars in the third quarter of 2023. I'm sorry, I'm saying that wrong. It grew on the pace of 15.4, almost 15.5 trillion dollars over the course of that quarter.
Spending.
Right. So the economy is roughly a $33 trillion economy, but that's $33 trillion if you look at it for the whole year, right? This is the size of our economy. But this report was in United States consumer spending, trading economics, that 15.48 in U.S. dollars, billion dollars in the third quarter. That compares to 15.343. So roughly, the economy grew by 160-something billion dollars over the course of the third quarter over the second quarter of this year. I know these are numbers, but it's important to understand these numbers.
But these numbers are great numbers
Exactly.
that the people are failing to understand how powerful this is. You know, does it make sense?
So here it's like you're looking at a horse that's running 25 miles an hour, and the announcer is saying, well, you know, this horse is kind of trotting in its gait, you know, and it looks like, you know, running that way, you might not be able to run more than 18 miles an hour the way that horse is running. And you say, but the horse is running at 25 miles an hour. That may be, but look how it's running. It doesn't look like it's, you know what I mean? People are, they're actually telling you that what your eyes see and your ears hear are not true.
Yeah.
Only what's coming out of their mouth, you know, is true. Consumer sentiment. These surveys rate how people feel about the economy in the near term and their individual or family prospects. The U.S. Index of Consumer Sentiment is at a current level of 59.2, down from 63.5 last month, but it's up from 58.4 a year ago. So consumer sentiment is better than it was a year ago. If that's what you're looking at as your economic forecast, obviously consumers, from a perspective of, do I have enough money to be able to buy stuff that I want? Consumers are saying, I do have enough money to buy what I want.
That's correct.
So my economy must be good.
Right.
Business indicators. Surveys whether businesses are seeing new orders, higher production levels, timely deliveries from suppliers, and increasing inventories, and high employment. The Conference Board of Leading Economic the Conference Board's leading economic index for the United States increased by almost 1% in October to the index they use is 118.3, and that compares to that compares to only a 10 0.1% increase in September, and a 0.7% increase in August. That's based on the Conference Board's leading economic index. Bank lending. This is banks having money to be able to, and not just having money, but banks actually lending money to businesses around the country. These are the funds that businesses seeking funds needed to expand their businesses. The United States bank lending rate was reported at 8.5% in December. This stayed constant from the previous number of 8.5% in November. The U.S. lending rate data is updated daily, averaging 3.5% from January of 1980 to December of 2023. So, interest rates were way down for a long period of time. Jerome, Powell, the chair of the Federal Reserve, raised interest rates up. So now you're paying a little bit more than 5% in interest rates today. But in spite of that, people are still borrowing money at a higher rate now than they were borrowing money a month ago or over the course of the last quarter. Shipping activity is also similar. Most people buy things that come from someplace else. Overall economic activity correlates with the movement of goods across the continent. So in this article, it asks, what is the current rate of freight in the United States, the current level of freight in the United States? According to the U.S. Transportation Services Index, freight is at a current level of 138.7, up from 136.8 last month, and down from 139.8 over a year ago. On every standard measurable, the U.S. economy is on stable ground and is steadily expanding. That, to me, is critically important.
Very
important.
important.
Who is telling us that the economy sucks? How could so many people think that the economy was bad when you're looking at these broad indicators and they're all either stable or rising?
Right.
How is it that there are so many people, as a percentage of Americans, who think the economy is bad? It's because the people they're getting their information from is implying, in the way that they're giving the information, that something bad is going on.
Two questions, Mr. Hare. First one, are we in a place where, or have we gotten a little better to the point that we are pulling away from the probability of having to beat Donald Trump or deal with Donald Trump, or is he on his way out, or because...
What's happening is, because the media seems to be really, how shall I say, focused on the idea of there being a robust competition for who gets to be president of the United States next year. If Trump sinks in the polls and becomes toilet water in the polls, their thought is that whoever's left, even if it's Nikki Haley, won't have enough momentum for it to be a credible, a robust campaign. If it's not a robust campaign, if it becomes a fait accompli that Biden's going to win, then they're not going to be able to sell a lot of advertising and promoting, what's going on in the race. So it seems to me that they're doing things to deliberately try to keep the race close, so that you got to have a lot of commercials being bought, by people. There's got to be a lot of advertising.
Okay. Second question, is President Biden going to come out? And I know he doesn't have to campaign. He's the front runner already at this point. But at some point, some of his positiveness in the things that he's done has to come out through through the Democrats.
Well, think about it. Remember when Trump was president? Every time Trump farted, they had a national news story about it. Every time Trump moved his finger, the national news story about it.
Right.
Everything Trump did through the course of his presidency, it wasn't that his people were talking about it. Trump would say something, and everything would not just get reported, they would do stories about it. They would do analyses about it and keep it going all day long.
Right.
In Biden's administration, you haven't seen any of that. When Biden goes to meet with people in other countries, it's a small story. when Biden talks about an initiative that he's getting underway, it's a story, but they give you a slant about why it shouldn't be done, or
Right.
why it wouldn't be valid, and so on. So what you got was all this free, and it still goes on this day. Today, you will see 5 times as many hours of or minutes of stories about Donald Trump today in the news than you will see about Joe Biden. Even though Joe Biden is the president and he's doing stuff right now. It's not that Biden's not talking about these things. He's talking about these things every single day.
Right.
Everywhere he goes, he's talking about these things. But the media isn't picking that up because they consider that to just be standard general news,
Yeah.
not particularly newsworthy.
They don't want to pick it up. But my point is this, Mr. Ayers, there are so many people out there, especially younger people, younger ages, that just don't have any idea about what's going on, totally uninformed. And when it comes down to the voting process, they're looking at something completely different from what's going on.
I feel what you're saying. I think that we have to change the way we think about how we communicate to the public. There must be a mechanism that we can use where, how when a meme comes up, somebody has some tricky way of talking about something, and then it catches on. It's like a virus, it catches on and it runs all over the social media.
Oh, yeah.
We need to learn from that mechanism and figure out how to use that as a way to communicate to the public overall, so that we send stories out that go through a certain set of mediums, through social media, and trust that those will get repeated in other social media and become the context that people begin to understand things from. So, for example, if it just seems like it's such a good thing to be able to talk about consumer spending being so high as it is right now and relating that to the low unemployment rate. If you have a low unemployment rate, it means there's a lot of people that are working. If there's a lot of people that are working and a lot of people that are rejoining the labor force to work, that means a lot of people have money. And that jives with a lot of with high consumer spending. So if those things are working together, you got a driver that's going to keep the economy continuously growing.
Right.
So stories need to be coming out about that, examples of that, and so on. And that should be soaked into the social media. So if you're listening to I don't know what social media is, Twitter and tweets and whatever it is, I'm not a social media person.
Yeah.
But, I mean, for me, you got to talk to me on the radio.
Yeah.
But for others who are in this medium, if we could figure out a way to communicate through that medium consistently, I think that will affect the way the public is thinking about what's going on right now. Then you got things like with the struggle in Ukraine. So they're taking it as, well, if they're in a stalemate, in Ukraine, that means that we wasted our money, in terms of providing the support that we've given to the Ukrainians. No, it doesn't. The reality is, if you don't stop Russia today,
Right.
you're not going to be able to stop Russia tomorrow.
That's
I was
right.
going to get into this article on the university presidents, that have their jobs being threatened because of things that students were saying, but I think we talked about that a little bit earlier. I just want to re-center people on this point again. The students that they're saying were allowed to talk about genocide, against Israel, that's what they're saying, and that was misconduct on such an egregious level that those students should have been put off the campus, expelled from school. Any teachers who co-sign that stuff, they should be fired from their jobs, and so on. That's what the Israeli Zionist Jewish people are talking about. But that's not true. They're beginning that reference with a statement that's not true. The students didn't say that genocide should be committed against the state of Israel. What the students said was that the state of Israel was engaging in genocide against the Palestinian people.
Right.
That's a completely different statement.
Completely.
And none of the media is saying that. I haven't heard a single person in the media say what I've just repeated.
Like they haven't caught on.
Right, and what this was in Associated Press. That's where you get your news stories from. UPI, Associated Press, Reuters, these are press sources that you get your information from. New York Times gets their information from them. Chicago Tribune gets their information from them. So if this is where you get your information from, how is it possible that they're reporting the actual truth, and yet none of the NBC, ABC, MSNBC, none of these people are actually reporting what actually occurred. They're reporting the way that some people are characterizing what occurred.
It's like they want it to be in disarray, Mr. Hare, and it's kind of crazy.
So, it's always about divide and we always say divide and conquer. I'm going to re-say that, and I'm going to call it divide and pimp. You divide people, and then you put, saddles on their back and have them ride against each other and whatnot, and you make them pay for the ride.
Right.
I think that's what's going on right now.
Right.
Thank you all for listening to us and supporting us. We look forward to talking to you all on Friday here at Living for the People at 91.3 FM WBNY. We will see you all then.